explanation there, but a child before their age of reason is not capable of committing an actual sin. Okay, so the child in the womb certainly would not be capable of committing moral fault, and certainly the child is not lost because of the fault of his parents. But the problem is original sin. That there is a real fault in original sin, not only on the part of Adam and Eve, but it comes down to us. It's a hereditary sin, as it were. Well, just as the body can be affected by such a hereditary disease in the very DNA constitution of the body, so the soul actually can carry, as it were, the consequences of original sin committed by our first parents. And we do. We're all conceived with that. Our souls are actually created by God in that condition. It was not what God willed. It wasn't the condition that he created Adam and Eve and their souls in. But we have contracted that original sin by the very fact that we are members of the human race and descended from Adam and Eve. They made an answer. They made a decision for us long before we could make a decision for ourselves. It is because of the original sin in that soul that child comes into the world as estranged from God. That is why we need the grace of baptism. That is why we need the grace of our Lord's sacrifice on the cross to repair that sin, make reparation for that sin. So a child who dies in the womb is not condemned because of his own fault, nor because of his parents' fault, but because he's been conceived in original sin. And the only remedy for that is divine grace. And the only way that sanctifying grace can enter that soul is by an act of faith, hope, and charity on the part of the child himself. Or the waters of baptism, right? And the child in the womb is incapable of performing an act of faith, hope, and charity. But that's why the godparents' faith answers for that child already then. But the child needs the grace of God and needs our Lord Jesus Christ and the power of his death upon the cross to redeem that child, needed applied to his soul through the grace of baptism. When we talk about the child who dies in the womb, it's as sad as it may be, we have to bow our heads to the wisdom of God who knows, what is best and what will actually provide the salvation of the most souls. And perhaps the good of that very soul of that child. Because the parent who loses a child like that, first of all, shouldn't think of losing the child. Yes, they've lost them in this life and whatever hopes they have, but there's so many parents whose hopes are disappointed and worse than disappointed by the way children grow up and the people they become. And they're very severely hurt and filled with anxiety. They fear that their children are going to be lost and will suffer forever in the fires of hell. And the children who die in the womb like that are not going to suffer in the fires of hell. In fact, they're not going to suffer. They are in limbo of the infants, which the church teaches us is a place of natural happiness. And can they know God? Well, they have human souls with the power to know truth and to love goodness, and on a natural level. And they can have certainly a theological knowledge of God, a natural theology of God, and can know who their Creator is. And it's not even forbidden to teach, that I know of, that parents of those children can actually visit them. I mean, we know that our Lord from the cross went in his soul. His soul went, he descended into hell. That's how it's represented in the creed, meaning he went to the limbo of the just to inform Abraham and all of the just souls of the Old Testament that the redemption was accomplished, and to lead them from that place. And they weren't there suffering. They were waiting for the news of the redemption. As our Lord said, Abraham saw my day and he rejoiced to see that I had come into the world. So Abraham, from that limbo of the just, was aware that Christ finally had come into the world. And he rejoiced at that. That doesn't happen in hell of hells, right? And there's even talk about how at the end of the world, yes, the world will be remade. It will be remade for those souls, and they will dwell here. They will be reincarnated. Their bodies will be restored to them, as the rest of us will undergo a resurrection, and that they will live a life of natural happiness here on earth. But it's